So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mike Pullen. I'm with CGI Federal, and CGI Federal is an organization bringing IT and professional services needs in alignment with the mission-critical services that agencies across the federal government provide. We are contract holders on both the Alliant and COSP3 contracts, and this is something that's near and dear to my heart, has been for a long time, talking about GWACs and IDIQs, and most of you have been stimulated to some degree. We can tell from the conversations and the fact that you're still here. Many have left to meet other obligations, but I think the part that's coming up here in the next few minutes will probably be some of the best interactions of the day, at least I hope it will be, and that really will depend on you. Lots of conversations have been going on for the four different questions, but oddly enough, from my ear, and tell me if I'm different and if you think something different, a lot of these conversations keep boiling back to education, education, education. Every answer seems to have education in its ramifications or somewhere in it, and the education of a very immature acquisition workforce is, of course, going to be key for our future. But you know, it's not just education on the acquisition workforce and the contracting officers and the contract specialists and the people that are bringing these opportunities out from program shops and sending them out to industry. It's really education on the part of industry as well. We've got to figure out a way to train our industry partners and folks within our own companies about how GWACs can be leveraged and used to perform better and work better for industry and really make this happen. Oddly enough, and we don't talk about this hardly at all, and please don't shoot me, I will say this, industry is as much at fault for contract proliferation as the government is, because just like these government GWAC contracts and the organizations that run them, we in industry don't want competition either. It would be really nice if we were the only one on the contract and you could just award it to us and it would be great. Well, unfortunately, the way things are with oversight and everything else and the FAR and all the stuff that's grown over the years, we're in a new world and a new environment, and it's really time for us as industry to start embracing competition and embracing the use and leverage of vehicles such as these GWACs to drive our business and make things successful for us. And this is something we've been talking about for a long time. We probably will be talking about for a long time, and a lot of the same issues have come up over and over again. One of those primary issues being education, and it's really a holistic education on the way the government goes about doing its business and the way we as industry can partner with those government agencies to really make that successful and work. If we're going to be successful at educating, everyone kind of needs to know how the acquisition process works. But it's really partnering with and understanding the missions of the organizations that really are going to make these things really work well. From the conversations you had, you may have still had some unanswered questions. We're going to go into the latter part of the session now and really try to get those questions out in a more group forum and get them answered. If you're sitting on a question or something that you didn't quite get answered or you still were hanging from on one of the table questions, don't walk out of here without asking it this afternoon. We've got a collection of much of the talk that was happening through the facilitators at the table and the people that were capturing those. And I'm going to turn it back over to Chris now to go through bubbles of those questions and then to stimulate the conversation. But if your bubble doesn't happen to pop up, don't hold back or walk out of here without asking that question. The more interactive you'll be, the more you'll walk away from here satisfied with the fact that you've got something answered that's really been bugging you or really been bothering you. And it doesn't matter which side of that fence you're on, government or industry, ask the question, because we really got to do this together in order to be successful. So Chris, I'm going to turn it back to you.
Awesome. Thank you. I feel like Lawrence Welk. Turn on the bubble machine. Oh, there's the bubble machine. So what they did was basically take all the notes from all of the table discussions and put it in this thing called Wordle. And these are the most used words that came through. This is which one? Contract. I'm sorry?
This is how to successfully transition contracts on GWAC.
Okay, so how to successfully transition. So if you were part of that discussion, these are the words you were talking about. Not shockingly enough, GWAC and GWACs are the biggest one. GSA, SOUP are all in there. Contract vendors. Some people who are on that side of the room. First off, I have to say, and a couple people said it, the contracting officers, if you're the contracting officers who are here, it was so refreshing to hear you guys. There were some, I don't know if everyone else, but they were really, really awesome. So more power to you. It's great to hear contracting officers doing awesome work. Who was on that side for part one and had some good takeaway that they want to share? Aside for, or tie in one of our bubbles with us, or was a reporter? I can find out. I know people who are on one side and had good things. You had Amy, you had a good point of talking, do you remember part one? I know it seems so long ago. And we were talking about how to streamline, was it streamline the process? Do you remember? Moving contracts onto and you had a takeaway about how to do this.
So talking from industry perspective, we've actually had a couple of our vehicles that were BPA, single award, straight to us, move over to the CSP3 GWAC. It was actually a really good experience for both the customer and us. And the best way is to kind of work through the GWAC contracting shop and have them work with your customer to figure out how to do it.
Single award, 1 year kind of thing.
Yep.
And you said, hey, why are you doing this on your own? Let's
move it over here, multi-year.
It's easier, it's streamlined, and that worked well.
Yep.
Awesome.
Very well.
The other one was about putting out, a couple contracting officers said that they would put things out and they would get no responses. Who said that? Are they still there? Somebody said that. Oh, yeah. You guys were saying that. And you're with, I'm sorry, HHS, right? And the sense you got, why did you hear nothing when you put something out there and it was crickets? How's that? I mean, everyone's saying they want business, and these aren't. We also heard discussions about people putting RFIs, and then a contract never results from those RFIs. But this is an actual RFP. There's business associated with it, and you got crickets. How's that happen, and what was your takeaway?
So a couple of notes from that. What we got from industry was that, number one, there's still that myth out there that a lot of our requirements are skewed or wired for the incumbent. And it's really not a competition, so a lot of them, don't consider it because they feel that it's not something that they will ultimately get.
You put the RFP out there to check off, say I did it, but it wasn't real.
Right,
yeah.
It wasn't real. And another...
that's a myth, that's not true.
That's a myth. That's a myth. I can't speak for every single contracting officer, but I know that, when we put something out there as a source of sought notice, we're generally looking for sources. And to the extent that we get a lot of feedback back from folks that are on GWACs, that might help determine whether or not we use a GWAC. So if we get nothing back at all, or we get nothing back from industry folks that are on GWACs because they're only focused on looking at GWACs, then we might decide to just go full and open because we got no feedback that would lead us to go use a GWAC.
The other thing that I took away, because I happened to be sitting there during that part of the conversation, was some people some in industry, they didn't see it because it wasn't part of their
NAICS code. So that was another issue, right? So a company may only do a search based on the NAICS code that they have, rather than looking at related NAICS codes, because unless it's a small business set-aside, there's not a lot of impact with the NAICS codes that we use, because there's nothing that says that we have to award to a contractor that has that particular NAICS code, again, unless it's a small business set-aside. And so expanding searches to include related NAICS code might expose companies to some other requirements, yeah.
That seems like something that's fixable, right? We can fix that problem, right? The other side, on the FAR Part 15, Robert, I know you were walking around on that side. So what did you learn?
So under the FAR Part 16 side, we had we need a new bubble.
Oh, it's up. There you go.
This is the bubble.
Yeah.
Okay.
You get to play Lawrence well.
This is fun.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of discussion about, what's the problem with this and what are the solutions. Ranging from, putting a link in the FAR to tell COs what type of, determination they have to write, to right through to let's get rid of it and flip-flop it so that COs have to write a determination or a DNF if they're not going to use an existing contract, which is where I stand on that. And I think that a lot of people stand on that, and I think I've had conversations with Matt at OMB and other people that, there was a lot of confusion when this was first written, and the reason that this was first written was because these types of contracts were at the high-risk list for GAO. So they were trying to come up with some language to wrap around not only these types of directed orders, but also to address assisted orders, and that's where the big risk was. And so instead of really separating out what type of determination you have to write up to do or to send money to another agency for them to do your contracting, they didn't make it very clear in the FAR that doing directed acquisition, meaning that you are keeping the money within your own agency, just leveraging another contract, there isn't really the risk in that area. There's actually very little risk in doing that because you're maintaining complete control of your money as well as your requirement. So I think that at the end of the day, I think that the recommendation is to really, have OMB look at this and to revise the language and to really use this as a way of helping to reduce the proliferation of contracts by getting contracting officers and decision makers as well as those senior executives in acquisition to really push down the education that you should really be looking at existing contracts before you go out and create your own. Now, this is, as you said, this is all about education. As Mike said, it's all about education. It's not just about educating the contracting officer at the operational level. It's about educating those senior executives and decision makers within agencies who sit at the top of the acquisition, world, or sit at the top of the CIO offices, and historically have created contracts for certain needs and work with the COs, and they compete and recompete orders the same way that they've recompeted them over 30 years. And so we really need OMB or some higher authority to push down the education that using existing contracts is okay, using existing contracts is encouraged, and that, if you're not using an existing contract, tell us why. So that was at the end of the day, walking around, I think that was, basically the gist of the discussion. Yes?
One thing, and we had...
Hold on, let's get you so we can actually hear you. Yeah, there you go. It's okay. It won't bite you, promise.
In our group, we had the same discussion. However, there was a point made that at the end of the day, these justifications are potentially not being vetted fully. So say a group, maybe OMB, vets a justification that says, I'm going to not use a GWAC or use whatever vehicle. Who is making a stand or the final judgment on, okay, your justification is not accepted, and there seems to be a thought that there isn't a willingness to say, no, you need to use this GWAC, even if they provided a justification.
Yeah, so there's two different things in FAR Part 17. One is that you have to do a business case analysis if you're creating a contract over a certain dollar value. You have to go to OMB and put it into the OMB MAC system and get comment from the rest of the government, and then you take those comments and some people read them, and then you go and you create your contract and do what you were going to do anyways. Because there's no meat to that. There's no decision-making authority
OMB doesn't
around
push
that.
back on that at all.
I don't see a lot of pushback on it. I don't see any contracts.
Matt basically
I don't
said-
see any contracts going into the MAC system and then all of a sudden they don't get awarded.
Right.
I see them going into the MAC system because it says that's a checkbox. We have to put it in the MAC system. We have to look at the comments from the rest of the government, then go and do what you're going to do anyways. So that's part of the comments we received in that. There needs to be some meat around that, and that there has to be some decisional authority at some level to look at that and say, push back to the agencies and say, hey, we got these comments. There's other contracts out here that you can put this work on. You need to overcome this hurdle in order to award this contract. And the other part of Part 17 is the justification that you have to write up to use an existing contract, which is really, doesn't really make much sense. So write a justification to create a new one, but then also write a justification to use an existing one. When do you not have to write a justification? So that's where I see conflict, and I think that, with the message to, continuing message to reduce the proliferation in contracting, we really need to get, the contracting officers to feel comfortable, and the only way they're going to feel comfortable is if you change the language in the FAR to reflect what the intent really is.
So when we officially do this, we need, changes here, and then it's a capital change up there, so change should actually be bigger. And I enjoy that want is one of our words. I don't know why. We apparently want something. Yeah. We need want and change to be close together, and there we go. Yeah.
So FAR changes are far away. It takes a while to get them changed, and we all know that, and there's numerous ones. And common logic tells us that we should always justify our acquisition strategy. So a part of the FAR change probably should say, always justify your acquisition strategy, and then beyond that, I agree with you 100%, justify why you wouldn't use a contract that exists to perform, if it can perform what you need it to do. In the interim, and I'll back up, the Clinger-Cohen Act was not invoked so that the Cohens had jobs, because Darlene and Rob could both work on both GWAC programs. But your wife actually made this suggestion, because I happen to be sitting at the table, and I'll give her full credit for this, is having that justification as a template already formed out for the agency to use would be a perfect interim solution for making this an easier process for the agencies to now use the contract in the way they should. But when we go to changing the FAR, we should use some more common sense in that, and maybe our recommendation should be that a justification of your acquisition strategy always required, and why you're not using an existing contract would need to be justified on top of that.
I agree.
The other part, and this maybe came through, and maybe this is a good opportunity to transition. Are you ready for part 3, Robert? They have to switch computers. But one of the recommendations, and I don't remember who it was from because I would give credit, but they said that the myth-busting campaign from OMB was pretty successful, and maybe doing that almost on a monthly basis with, here's the myth of the month. And that way you're able to focus on a different thing all the time, maybe do a blog so all these are archived, so contracting officers can go back and say, hey, it says OMB put it right here in the blog. We don't have to keep doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. Yeah, she's so scared of the mic. Why are you scared of the mic?
The last thing was, and I think for the most part, we were all for change or somehow revising, but someone made the point that at the end of the day, the lack of use of GWAC isn't necessarily related to the FAR and the words. It's more a lack of education. So if anything else, at the top of the list, it would be simply a lot of CEOs out there still don't know what GWACs are out there and available for them to use, and the value, the streamlining, and the efficiency.
Of course, my perception of change is we all love change as long as we can keep doing this thing the same way we always have. And that's the kind of change we love. So
yeah. So one of the last comments that I wanted to bring up and that I heard in over and over was, as contracting officials, we go through levels of certification to become contracting officers, and at no time throughout that training do you get trained on how to use existing vehicles, or what is a GWAC, or how does that work. So one of the recommendations maybe is to consider putting that as part of the curriculum when you are going through the certification process to become FACC certified in contracting, is to really bring some education to that. There's education on how to use schedules. There's education on all different types of acquisition and different classes you have to go through, but nowhere in those classes, because I've gone through them all, do they talk about GWACs, or do they talk about how to use existing vehicles, or that is the encouraged way of buying?
And it's a good point here, I think. All this isn't going nowhere. This is all going to be pulled together in a white paper that will go then to OMB and probably get shared on the Hill. So hopefully we can actually make a difference. Hi, Darlene. Yeah.
Just a quick comment, that's
Yeah.
all.
As long as you want. You take your time. Well, you need to talk into the mic because then we can't hear you.
Okay, thank you. Actually, whenever the contracting officers are going through their education, they're educated on the sources of supply that they are required to use. And so but I still don't know why they're not putting two and two together. Once you get in the field and you have your own local policies and procedures, it somehow goes by the wayside. But it is in the order of the sources of supply that you're really supposed to be using. But somehow it just gets muddled and
Look at contracts
And look at
very
it.
closely. Right. So this is the bubble for question 3 or whatever, well, part 2, 1 or whatever we're calling it. So the question was how GWACs streamline the acquisition process. And again, not shockingly, GWACs and GWAC are big in there. Authority, templates needed, purchasing, a lot of words very similar size. So it's general. I was sort of surprised the people was as small as it was, frankly, but because at the table I was sitting at, there was a lot of discussion of people. Oh, there's another people over here, capital people versus non-capital people. You guys are all capital people, so I wanted to touch base with Thomas or Tom. Tom. Tom retired from government and then left and did other things for 2 years and now is back, not back in government, back in industry, but he's one of those people who still, when he talks about government programs, he still calls it we. So you know he hasn't really been out that long. So help with the justification of why should people use GWACs? Why do GWACs help streamline the contracting process?
Sure. Well, from my perspective, both in and out of government, especially with the CIO-SP program, is that if they go to the program, most of the work is done for them because the online ordering system, I think, is fantastic. It does almost everything for them from once they get their logon ID, from entering in all the data that they need to put in to everything but the award at the end, signing the contract. If they don't have a statement of work to put in, NITAC helps with the statement of work if they need help with it from the program side. If the contracting officer is reluctant to use it, NITAC can also explain to them how the program works if they've never gone on to EGOS and they don't have a login for it. But the key is getting them into the system so that they feel comfortable working it. But once they get into the system, it's just a very easy, intuitive system. I think there are people in here who used it that I've heard them say that too, that it's an intuitive system to use, both for the vendor and for the customer. And if you get both sides working well in the system, then you get a very streamlined process.
So, Tom, I'm giving you a lot of power right now.
Yeah.
You have the ear of OMB. This is going to go into the white paper. What recommendation would you give OMB that would help GWAC streamline the acquisition process? What can OMB do to make this better? Look, I stumped the band.
No, you haven't. I'm just figuring out how to say it.
There's a long list.
Yeah.
There's a long list, but I think from the streamlining process, it has to look at the proliferation of Macs. There's just too many of them out there, and there's more every day, it seems like, coming online or getting ready to be competed.
It's funny because we also had this discussion, I think even at our table, there were some contracting officers who said, I like the competition among contracts because it makes for, guess what, we heard 3 of them up here, they're all trying to out better the next.
That's right.
It's good for government, it's good for agencies, it's good for...
The problem is you've got the same pool of vendors mostly on the same contracts. And so you set up a situation where we're all competing against ourselves on the same contracts, and it doesn't really make sense. And And from the government perspective, they're spending a lot of money to first write the RFP, then to put it out, then to evaluate it, and then to go through protests, and then to get it awarded on every time they do it. And then every time they award a task order in that, they're spending money, which could already be done in the GWAC, which it was designed to do in the first place. And then when you get the fact that they're all duplicative, some of them in the exact language, then it just proves on its face that there's no need for a multiple agency award if it's duplicative word for word.
Great. Anyone else have ideas on whatever we're calling it? This question. Oh yeah.
You know, streamline acquisition was the intention of GWAC contracts. We're never going to get to streamline until we use the streamlining availability that's already inherent in GWAC contracts and the flexibility that's already built into those contracts to do flexible cleanse, flexible orders, flexible tasks, flexible ability. We keep wanting to put BPAs or IDIQs under IDIQ contracts when the flexibility was already there to the largest part to be able to do a lot of that work. New words on the document probably won't solve the problem as much as using it, and I guess it boils back to the education and maybe some clarification to bring those streamlined emphasis to the top of the FAR that says you don't when you've done a GWAC, it is for streamlined acquisition, and you don't have to repeat the process of evaluating corporate capabilities and experience and past performance, which is already in there. Just bring it up so that you now know, and it's easier for the education process to have it in front. I think that's the same thing when we get back to Rob's point about the initial part. It's not a DNF you don't have to get the findings in there. It's just a quick determination, small letter that you have to put in as to why you're using the GWACs. If you were already educated, this wouldn't be a big enough problem. So it's actually putting a lot of the education into the document of saying this is why it's here and this is why you can use it, and now you can simply read it instead of going to the course for your certification to have it brought in. You can now read it within the FAR. So as we bring that clarity to the FAR and say it's not really, and I think to turn it around to say use existing contracts first and put the clarity of what the streamline is at the top instead of having to dig through and read it, I think we'll get a lot further in our education efforts because it's now written in the document that they're using as the basis for executing.
Anyone else have comments on this particular question? If not, I'm going to move to our last question, which was no, that's the other one. I'm sorry, my glasses. What are the best practices for training for teaming? Sorry. And not shockingly, team and teaming are the big words. NITAC came out very CIOSP3 came out good, so you guys are doing well on this apparently. Vehicle management, time, large companies, I'm guessing, small companies, RFI. Kind of interesting to see what's up there. What were some people's big takeaway from this? I wasn't on this side, so you have to help me. No one was on this side? I saw people over there and having good discussions. Oh, okay, I'll come around. Hold on. I'd like to get my Fitbit steps.
Thanks. We looked at it from both a large business best practices and a small business best practice. And the one thing that came out very clear was the small businesses needed to have a very niche market when they approached large businesses. And from a large business perspective, small business perspective, they were looking for teammates that they could trust. They feel that they wouldn't kind of, rob them of their, capability or what have you. So that came out very, very clear, at our table. With those things, niche markets.
Thank you. Focus on what you do best and make the big guys better. Did you have something you wanted to add?
We looked at it from.
You always look at me like I'm not going to.
We looked at it from this standpoint, and we had 3 or 4 government participants at our table, and
I'm not going to fight you, I promise.
so we talked about all of the emphasis we as contractors put into making sure that we have the right team in place, so that we can meet requirements, and also making sure that we're able to put forward a unified front when we're submitting our proposals. And so we wondered, and we asked the question at the table on the government side when they're looking at proposals, is this idea of, did they team up well, or what's the value of this team? Is that forefront in their decision-making process? And I kind of got the impression that we put more emphasis on it from a teaming standpoint as contractors, and for the government, they're really just trying to make sure at the end of the day that they're getting the best value. And so being able to demonstrate that you have a team that together you can meet 100% of their requirements is the foremost in their mind in terms of evaluation.
Evaluation criteria are, does it help me do my job better, right? In the end. Awesome. Were you on this side? Did you hear?
I was.
And?
So one of the things that I think that this ties into, and I heard this discussion, into proliferation of contracting, right? Because if you're on a GWAC, you love GWACs, and you don't want any other contracts. If you're not on a GWAC, proliferate so I can get a contract, right? So that's why I think teaming is very important. That's why we put an enormous emphasis on teaming at NITAC, CIO, SP3, and our other contracts, is to really encourage this. For those companies who are not able to participate as a prime, there are an enormous amount of opportunities to come in team with those primes to be able to work with them as subs at the task order or delivery order level. So there's an enormous amount of work for those companies who don't necessarily win as a prime. And I think that ties directly into, as I said, the proliferation of contracts, and that the pool of vendors that can participate in these types of IDIQs is so exponentially more than just the primes that win. And I think that is, it's a huge emphasis that we put on and work with our primes on, but also to invite in those companies who are not part of our prime contract holders to really show them how they can participate in these types of contracts. So I heard a lot about that, and there were some other comments, mostly having to do with what, how to do it, how to team, what are the best practices that small businesses use. I heard a lot that large businesses are always actively looking for teaming partners. They're always actively looking for somebody that can come in and meet a niche area of a statement of work or a requirement that they're not able to meet, and are actively always looking for those small businesses or other businesses that know of a government problem that they can solve. But they need a prime contractor on one of these vehicles to help win that work, and they win it as part of a team.
The one area that the table I was sitting at discussed in terms of maybe the need for legislation, and I think it's been an ongoing issue, is that middle-sized business, not small, not large. We still don't have that right, and I think Chris brought up. We have to figure out those middle guys and find some way of dealing with that in an effective way. And I think that cuts across the lines on all of this. We haven't figured it out yet, right? And no good solution yet.
There is no real good solution. One of the things that's unique about CIO SP3 small business is that at the 5-year mark, when companies have to go and recertify, a lot of those businesses aren't going to be small anymore. But we set up that contract that doesn't mean that they get penalized and have to go away. So what it will end up happening is that there will be a pool of businesses within that vehicle who are medium-sized businesses, and it's up to our customers to decide whether they want to compete in order with that pool, or set it aside for small, or use the large business vehicle. So it sort of will create an environment for those businesses so that they don't get punished when they grow. One of the ways that our program judges success is that our contract holders do well and grow and make money. And when that happens, you sometimes aren't small anymore. So we don't want you to be penalized for that.
Will there be a reverse process that goes from large to mid-size?
When you recertify at the 5-year mark, you can become small. You can become small. You can't become mid-size because there's no such thing as mid-size.
you have other than small? They'll be in the...
They'll be considered other than small, but in reality, they won't be CGI, right? They'll be mid-size.
Before, Rob's going to wrap us up, but a couple of just closing, well, first off, I have to check. Anyone have anything they want to add that they want to make sure and get in our white paper? Oh, I knew you would. Thank you. Mike,
You're going to hold this. Okay. One of the things about GWACs, and I was on this side of the room too, so I'm cheating, but one of the things about GWACs that people don't seem to embrace, one of the streamlined features, and one of the best practices, I should say, that's emerged between Alliant and CIOSP3 is the flexibility to team with anybody at a task order level. And that's critical because a lot of these MACs that are not so effective, these folks make up their contracts, they sit around a room, they throw things up on a whiteboard, basically terms and conditions that in the end ultimately don't matter one whit because this work could land on any of these contracts, could be done on any of the GWACs. But that freedom is something people can't put their brains around because I get a call every day in our GWAC center, Mike, how do I get so-and-so on our CISP3 or Alliant team? And the answer is, you don't have to. You just need to talk to them when you need them. And you can team on any of our contracts if they'll let you. But some of these other MACs, you've got to go and get permission. You've got to keep it stable as if you know what the work is going to be and who's going to be the right teammate and subcontractor. So it's one of the many benefits and streamlined factors in GWACing, and that is that you can team with anybody. You can team with the right partner at the right time for the right work.
And I've heard more good verbs come out of today. GWACing, FARring.
We GWAC all the time.
You know, you do the GWAC at weddings. You do the GWAC. Right. It's a great dance. Right after you do the chicken dance. So a couple of just notes. The Word pages. So all four of those will be sent to you. We'll probably clean them up so we don't have people kind of thing. We'll clean them up a little bit, and then all those will be sent to you. The white paper, when it's done, who's actually? Do you guys pull that together? Who's pulling it? Oh, they're all going to pull it together. And so the white paper will be sent to you as well when that's out. So if you registered, you'll get it. Can I get a copy too? Okay, there you go. Robert looks after me. And we'll send you Matt Blum's slides too, so you can have those. And is there anything else that I've forgotten? You guys were awesome. Thank you so much for sharing and participating. You guys really did great. And I'll just mention it one more time because I know you never get, government people are never thanked these days. So the contracting officers, you guys were all so phenomenal. And I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. I know the rest of the people appreciate it. So with that, I'll hand it back to Rob.
Thanks, Chris. So I just wanted to really thank everybody for participating today. I think this was a great session. A little bit different. I spent an awful lot of time going around talking, going on panels, giving speeches, but these are the types of events that I really enjoy, is when we can sit down and have real discussions about what's going on, what are some of the best practices, what are some of the things that can change to make things better. I really appreciate it for you to take time out of your day to come here and help us do this. The information and the recommendations will go to OMB. They'll be shared with all of you, as Chris said, and I think that we have some really good outcomes from this meeting. I really want to thank ACT-IAC for putting this together. The work that they do, collaborating between government and industry, it's an enormous amount of work, and what I always say about it is that what's so unique about it is the outcomes that you get from every ACT-IAC event that you participate in, is that there's always something that comes out of it that's positive. Again, thank you all for participating. I look forward to seeing you, around, and really thank you for participating in this, and look forward to any additional feedback that you may have. Thank you.